How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Down podcast. Today, we are going to be reacting to some of the worst offensive line play I have ever seen in my life. In the Week 2 game against the Houston Texans, not the best offensive performance from the Bears yesterday. Perhaps a little bit better than Week 1, where they were able to muster up absolutely nothing. However, still very porous and a poor outcome nonetheless. So we are here to break it down today. Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't seen us before or you're a returning subscriber, do us a favor. Click subscribe, click the bell, click the like button. Sorry, I am so rusty at this. I think like fourth or fifth video back now. But my name is Chris Malpe. Good to be back once again, joined by my esteemed co-host once again, Parth Shaw. Parth, been a minute since we've done this together, but feels good to be back once again. How are you doing? And how are the vibes right now, one day after a bit of a soul-crushing loss?
Yeah, it feels weird to be back because I haven't recorded since, you guys have started this operation back up, but excited to be back. When we stopped, I think it was the year the Bears went, 3-14. So there wasn't much positivity to talk about at that time. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble if I kept recording, honestly. So it's good to, come back to more positive vibes, even though after last night, the game wasn't what we hoped for, especially on the offensive side. But it was an L that I expected before the season, so you can't be too mad about it. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the O-line wasn't great. The offense still is struggling, but man, that defense is great. So just a shout out to the defense.
Yeah, perennial defensive performance once again. And it's funny that you mentioned the 3-14 season where we were last doing this and kind of stopped 2/3 of the way through the season, because looking back on that and comparing it to now, Bears fans and the media are treating it like it was that time when they were that terrible and whatnot. That this isn't even close to as bad as that. This doesn't even touch that. I'm at least happy to still come sit behind a microphone 2 weeks into the season, 1-1 record, and be a little bit positive. So
there's a lot more positivity and a lot more hope. We can't just give up after 2 weeks, guys.
100%, 100%. But we are here to talk about the gaping negativity, or the gaping piece that is standing out as being glaringly bad for the Bears offensively. We're going to stay away from Caleb Williams in this video. Obviously, I think he has some throws last night that he wished he could have back. However, he did show some decent control over the offense from time to time. So obviously some ebbs and flows come with a rookie quarterback. I think the hype around Williams, obviously rightfully so, is pretty high coming into the season, but everyone needs to remember that he's a rookie. That's all I'm going to say about that. We'll talk about that in the future. We want to talk about the offensive line right now, and let's hop right into it. Parth, obviously, in our group chats behind these microphones and cameras, you like to get pretty animated during a lot of these games. So let's hear your raw reactions to last night's offensive line performance. If you want to rant, whatever you want to do, however you want to go about it, let's hear your thoughts on how the O-line played last night.
Yeah. I mean, in simple terms, was not good. There isn't much good on this O-line. It's hard. It got to be harsh here. Week 1, we saw them come out flat, especially the interior line. Week 1, Coleman Shelton was getting pancaked here and there, just did not have a good game. Nate Davis didn't look good week 1, and neither did Tevin Jenkins. Someone who we expected to take that step, who's been pretty solid in his time in Chicago. Regardless of injuries, I thought he was a good player, but he struggled week 1 as well. And then this week, I was expecting, a tougher fight, some improvements, especially after that performance they had the prior week. You expect the O-line to come out a little bit stronger so we can start running the ball, help the rookie quarterback out. But it was the same story again. We couldn't get the run game going. This time the tackles even looked worse. Darnell Wright had himself, in my opinion, the worst game as a Bear
100%, yeah,
that he's had so far. And this isn't just because it's all of them. You can have two guys on the line, and it can ruin it for everyone. It can make everyone look worse. Guys are overthinking what the guy next to him is going to be doing, whether or not if he's going to pick him up or do I have to go help him out, and then forgetting their own guy. It's just a lot of problems, and it falls on Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach, for getting these guys more prepared, especially knowing that you got a rookie quarterback and you got to run the ball with a rookie quarterback. I mean, any quarterback, but especially when it's the second game of his career. You're on the road, Sunday Night Football, playing a very good opponent and a very good team. I mean, they have really good pass rushers, Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson. We saw Will Anderson, run through our tackles. Daniil was making plays left and right. So yeah, it's kind of tough because like last week it was the interior line. This week it was more of the outsides. I thought that struggled. I felt like their edge rushers were able to time the snap every time. It wasn't encroachment or anything, but they were jumping that ball pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly. It felt like they were getting and then that push they're getting, that doesn't help DeAndre Swift at all. He's looked horrible this year, but it doesn't all go on him. And then it makes it harder for Shane Waldron, who's trying to navigate calling this playbook, who's also just not been looking great. But you can't put blame on him or Caleb when your line can't protect and you can't run the ball. So it was tough to watch. I'm hoping for some reshuffling. You can't just put the same 5 guys out there at the same spot and hope it to go different next week. I feel like.
Yeah, it really seems like the cookie crumbles if it can't get started up front. Obviously, you think simply in life, to get ahead, you have to have a strong start. So, same exact thing goes here for the Bears. Not a great offensive line performance whatsoever. And with the offensive line performing as poorly as they do, it really takes the identity out of the offense. I think the Bears, with what I've seen out of Waldron in the past, and Waldron's a whole nother conversation that we can have. Wasn't happy with the play calling last night either, but once again, got to give it some time to gel. You have no identity if you can't get blocking up front. I think the Bears ideally want to be a run first team with Swift to potentially open up some intermediary passes for Williams. But when you can't get any semblance of a run game going, there's just no identity there. And when the Houston Texans, I got to give them credit, as you mentioned, Parth, Will Anderson, alongside Daniil Hunter and D'Amico Ryans did a great job scheming them all night, are blitzing on a majority of their snaps, and the Texans know that the Bears are going to have to pass in second and third and long scenarios. It all crumbles really quickly. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, not the best performance from Caleb Williams. I believe he got hit 11 times, hit 11 times, sacked 7 times, dropped back to pass 44 times, sacked 7 times, pressured 36 times. So these stats are just ridiculous. But overall, terrible performance from the offensive line. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Fortunately for the Bears, a weaker stretch of games coming up. Obviously, week 3 in Indianapolis. DeForest Buckner is going to be doubtful for this one, which could be huge for the Bears. So hopefully these guys are out all week pushing sleds at practice, working their butts off. It's also worth noting that they had a ridiculous amount of false starts called on them last night, which is inexcusable as well, and truly, in my opinion, comes down to discipline. So awful performance overall. But fortunately, with a couple of weaker opponents coming up, hopefully this issue can somehow be solved. Parth mentioned it earlier, maybe switching around some of the players on the line. You got to try something to figure this out. So let's move into another topic. And we don't have to touch on this one for long, Parth. Wanted to talk a little bit about left guard Tevin Jenkins. Obviously, you touched on him. Jenkins, really, I feel like the past couple of seasons has been an unsung hero on the Bears' offensive line when he's been able to be healthy. Question obviously talks about how do you feel about him moving forward. I want to talk more about a contract extension because obviously that's something he wants. I think still even it's something that Bears fans think that he deserves. What does he have to do to be able to earn that extension this year in Chicago? And how do you feel about him moving forward past 2024?
Yeah, like I said, it's really hard to judge one of your own linemen when they're struggling as a unit because you're worried about the guy next to them, especially when he's playing next to Coleman Shelton, who's been struggling. So it's really hard to judge, but I think we got to move him to right guard because there needs to be changes with that position right now. I just don't feel comfortable putting out Nate Davis out there. I keep forgetting his name, but yeah, no, 64 can't be out there anymore. So I feel like Jenkins can go back to his spot where he played at right guard before, and him and Darnell Wright, who have shown that they can play well together and play at least get us some run game going. And if they're able to do that moving forward, I mean, I feel like Poles would be happy to give him an extension. But so far, what I've seen from the last two games, he's dropped off heavily from the last couple of years he's been here. And also, like you mentioned, the injury concerns are there with him. So it's really hard to pay someone like that. And all that factors in is what Ryan Poles believes. And at the end of the day, Ryan Poles, he's done a great job with this team. He's found us great weapons all over the field. But the one place where he struggled and also bargained with, in my opinion, hasn't paid enough attention or paid enough money towards is the offensive line. And that's the position he played in the NFL. That's the position I feel like he should know better than any other position. And consistently, we've struggled there the last 2 years. So 3 even.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring up the switch from right guard to left guard with Tevin, because we've seen some really good production when healthy out of Tevin the last 2 seasons, all of which has been at right guard.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the idea that you say moving him over back to the right side probably benefits the Bears. However, that is just going to be a cardboard box on the left side, probably with Nate Davis in that case alongside Braxton Jones. Jones actually probably isn't the worst part about this offensive line. It's got to be Shelton and Davis. So Jones has done a semi-decent to under-average job, underachieving job holding his own there on the left side. But we won't talk about him today. I think Jenkins is someone who is a Bear through and through. I think he's got to stay healthy. I think he's got to perform better. Parth, you and I talked about it off camera a couple of minutes ago. Didn't accept much responsibility in post-game interviews last night.
Yeah.
However, I do think he most definitely has it in him. And if there's a player that's going to pick up his play probably from this slow start to the season to the rest of it, it's likely going to be Tevin, someone who's been down there in the trenches and has continued to fight his way to earn a starting job for a handful of years. So I think a lot of it for him getting an extension comes down to health, but obviously that play's got to improve a little bit as well. Want to touch on this one just for a slight second. Darnell Wright, do you still have confidence in him? I'll go ahead and answer this one first. Absolutely 100%. He had a solid performance, I would say, in week 1 amongst the entire line, taking a look at it. Obviously not a great performance for him last night in week 2. However, he had a great rookie year last year. It's way too early to say he's a bust or anything like that. I think he is far from a bust, taking a look at that. So overall, still have full-fledged confidence in Darnell Wright. Still think he has the ability to be a great tackle there on the right side. 3 false starts for him last night, I think overall, not what we're used to with him. So I'm going to leave it short. Absolutely still have confidence on him, in him, and by far more confidence than I have in anyone else on that offensive front. So Parth, feel free to keep it as long or as short as you want, but how do you still feeling good about Darnell Wright, even though it was a little bit of a lackluster outing for him last night?
Yeah, no, I mean, Darnell's been a great player for us so far. I mean, yeah, yesterday was his worst game of his career. There's no sugarcoating it, but he's too young. You can't just give up on a guy like that too early. I still think he's going to be a good player. And like I said, it doesn't help when, guys around you aren't playing well, and he's next to Nate Davis, so who, in my opinion, has struggled the most out of the starters so far this year.
Absolutely. Let's transition here into some short-term fixes. It's really hard to answer this question at the moment. Obviously, you don't know who's going to be on the trade market in a couple of months or weeks. Not much depth, obviously, behind a starting offensive line that I would have to imagine, I don't have it in front of me statistically, is probably the worst in the league. But I would love to hear your thoughts. How do the Bears go about addressing this problem in the immediate future? What changes are you making if you're Shane Waldron, if you're Matt Eberflus, if you're Ryan Poles? Organizationally, how do we fix this problem and at least get the line up to a point where it's, maybe below average, but at least can be substantial and hold up for Caleb, DeAndre Swift, and get some successful offensive drives going?
Yeah, no, it makes it very hard, especially because Ryan Bates is now on the IR. That's someone who I would have loved to see at starting at center. I think he's actually one of the better players on our line who didn't start the season, which I was a little bit confused with. And Larry Borum also on the IR doesn't help because he's someone who could play tackle. Maybe you can move Braxton inside to left guard, and just have your. I mean, this would be my dream line to have Larry, um, Braxton. You got Bates at center, and then at right guard you got Tevin and right tackle Darnell. I think those five are our best players. I also think Kieran, the guy we drafted from
Yeah, Mega DJ,
Yale.
third round pick out of Yale.
So I think he should get some playing time now as he's gotten healthier. I think he was activated for his first week last week. So he's someone who can maybe come into left tackle, left guard. I mean, whatever we can do to get Nate Davis out of the five, I think could help in the immediate future.
Absolutely. I mentioned it earlier, but it felt like last night, it almost felt like watching Joe Burrow with the Bengals a couple of years ago. And I've got a couple Cincinnati buddies and friends who will be watching this video still today, a little bit. Burrow still does not have the best line around him, but it was just brutal last night. And it felt like last night was the worst case scenario. So, Parth, I completely agree with you. I think you have to try and find a way to switch it up. At the end of the day, it feels like with the lackluster performance we saw last night, it truly feels like it can't get much worse than that. So might as well try swinging around a couple of these pieces. I completely agree with you. I think we need to see some action out of a Mega DJ. Ryan Bates, someone who the Bears tried to claim by way of free agency a couple of years ago, finally gets traded here this offseason. Obviously starting the year on IR, but whenever he comes back, whenever he's healthy, I think you've got to throw him in there. He's someone who has proved to be a pretty solid switch player between a guard and a center over time. So I think you've got to try and figure that out. And yeah, I like what you said earlier about potentially moving over Jenkins. I think obviously that would be favoring the right side of the line. However, you could maybe catch some teams off guard by running to the left side or potentially scheming pass plays with Caleb rolling out to the left side. So I do think if you can bandage up that right side of the line, you could potentially get some run game going, potentially open up the playbook more with play action and get Caleb some more looks, as I mentioned earlier, with some intermediary routes, so we can start picking up some freaking first downs. I'm looking for first downs, much less touchdowns. But man, we better be able to do it this week against Gus Bradley. That's all I'm going to say. Before we sign off, one more question here. What's the long-term answer at offensive line? I'll start. I'll be quick and simple with this. Free agency, the draft. You've got a first-round pick coming next year that, depending on how the Bears finish, could probably be about middle of the pack. You've got Carolina's second-round pick, which right now, with Bryce Young being benched and Andy Dalton playing, Bears legend, as a starting quarterback, you would hope that pick would likely be 33 overall. However, if not, somewhere 34 to 38. So that pick's going to be high. All I'm going to say is you got to address offensive line regardless of where you choose to do so early in the draft. I would like to think Ryan Poles is going to be active in the next coming weeks with the trade deadline. So long story short, any transactions you can make to improve the offensive line, both middle of this season as well as next free agency, next draft, it's something we absolutely need to put an emphasis on. That's all I've got. So Parth, anything that I didn't touch on there for long-term answers at the offensive line?
No, you're right. We got to spend some money. Like I said earlier, Poles has been, bargaining with the O-line. So got to spend some money there. We got a lot of money in free agency that's coming up and possibly 2 top 40 picks. So, but I hope both of them are offensive linemen. I mean, our defense looks great. We have weapons. So, you've got, if Caleb can throw to these weapons, it would be nice. And you need some time for that. So you just got to get some O-line help for sure.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say. A lot of Caleb Williams slander, obviously, and I said I wouldn't bring him up much. I really think we haven't gotten a true evaluation of him yet.
No.
I think once the O-line holds up a little bit more, we'll get a better evaluation of how Williams can play.
It's week 2, first of all.
Yeah,
it's week 2.
And I think the expectation for him to come in and be Patrick Mahomes off rip, obviously, was way over exaggerated. So it probably didn't help that we were on Hard Knocks and saw a couple cool passes in the preseason. But let's continue to be patient. Let's hope this offensive line blocking gets better. We can develop a run game, get a little bit of a pass game going, really see what Shane Waldron's up to. One last thing I would like to add for short-term answers on the offensive line. I'd like to see the Bears utilize a couple more two tight end sets. Obviously, there's been a little bit of favoritism to Gerald Everett so far over Cole Kmet. That might be due to familiarity with Shane Waldron and Gerald Everett. They worked a couple of years together up there in Seattle. However, two tight end sets are something that can potentially bring in some more big boys for blocking in a lot of scenarios. So excited to see how the Bears go about fixing these problems. I expect the offensive line to be better in the Week 3 game against Indianapolis, and we'll continue to go from there. Hopefully some midseason transactions to continue to help bolster this thing up front. So this has been another episode of the Bear Down Podcast. You can find us on Instagram as well as Twitter at Bear Down. You can find the links to me and Parth's social media pages down in the description. Parth and I don't even know. I've already worked a 10-hour day and my brain is fried at this point. Yeah, I feel like I'm going a little crazy, but a little rusty doing these outros, but it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be back with some more content soon. Once again, don't know how often it's coming, but want to try and get you guys a couple of videos a week. Longest video back so far is this one, in typical Bears fashion, complaining. However, it feels so good to be back. Appreciate all you guys who are supporting once again. If you are still listening and you haven't already, click that bell, subscribe, drop a like on this video, follow us on social media. We'll be back later this week with more content focusing on the Bears and the Colts. That's pretty much it for us, though. My name is Chris Maltby. He is Parth Shaw. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.